Hi there, people. Welcome to another edition of Counterpunch with Trevor Loudon, the show that looks at and counters the unfolding world communist revolution. Please like the show, share the show, and subscribe on epochtv. I'm sorry I haven't been on for a little while. It's not that I don't care anymore. I have been absolutely flat out working day and night on my latest project, which is a new book, or two books actually. It's called Security Risk Senators, Part 1 and Part 2. And Part 1 will be released October 1st. You can pre-order it now, but it's released October 1st. And this is a pitch, absolutely. All of you need to understand just how deeply penetrated the United States Senate is by foreign enemies and domestic. Why would you target the US Senate? Well, the Senate is what makes treaties. The Senate is about defense policy. The Senate is about deals with other nations. So you can bet that the governments of Russia and China and Iran and Cuba and Venezuela and many other nations who may at times be a little hostile to the United States care very much about what the Senate does, and they care very much about who is in the US Senate. Imagine if you were, say, Xi Jinping, and you wanted to take down America. You wanted to damage America, wreck the economy, cut the military, all sorts of things. You would want to deal with the US Senate because you'd be thinking this: do I really want to get into a multi-billion-dollar trade war with the United States just now when my economy is teetering? Do I really want to risk a multi-trillion-dollar shooting war? Possibly. But it would be better if I had more enemies operating in the US government to help that war effort. What's going to happen with Taiwan? What are China's plans for the Pacific? All of this and America's reaction is very heavily dependent on the US Senate. It's the most powerful political decision-making body on the planet. What would you do? What's a more productive use and less dangerous use of resources? A trade war, a shooting war, or co-opting American senators and congressmen? It's not hard to figure out, is it? But surely that couldn't happen because, you have security around the US Senate. You have background checks. You have scrutiny on these people. Well, no, actually you don't. There are virtually no background checks in the US Congress or the US Senate for either members or staffers these days. Now, do you think the Chinese know about this? Do you think the Iranians know about this? And the Nicaraguans and the Venezuelans and the North Koreans and the Russians? Do you think they understand that the United States Senate, with the most powerful lawmakers on the planet, that has a massive impact on what happens to Russia or China, there are no background checks on any of their staff and on any of the senators themselves? But surely that there's not going to be bad guys in the US Senate, right, or bad women, because, the media would warn us about these people. Well, how's that been working out? When Dianne Feinstein of California, it was revealed that she had a Chinese spy working in her office for 20 years. She said, "He's my driver."
I received some information from the FBI, and to the best of my knowledge, the person involved did nothing wrong.
Senator Dianne Feinstein defended her former employee against accusations of spying. Politico reported that in the 2000s, a staffer in Senator Dianne Feinstein's San Francisco field office was reporting back to the MSS. That's a Chinese intelligence agency.
He was her office manager. He had Defense Department documents going across his desk. He was delegated to attend events at the Chinese consulate in San Francisco by the senator. He was her most senior staff member, and she publicly tried to deflect attention away from him. She was the head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee when he was working in her office. And what happened to this man? Nothing. What happened to Senator Feinstein? Nothing.
House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy is filing a resolution that seeks to remove Representative Eric Swalwell from the House Intelligence Committee. McCarthy says this is because of Swalwell's ties to a suspected Chinese communist spy.
What about when Eric Swalwell, also in California, a congressman, was caught in a liaison with a Chinese spy, Christine Fong, who was very close, by the way, to Russell Lowe, who was Feinstein's spy. What happened when that was revealed? Nancy Pelosi kept Swalwell on the Intelligence Committee. So these things are going on. I've written a book called Security Risk Senators. It'll be available on my website, trevorloudon.com, October 1st. If you go to my shop, just go to trevorloudon.com, but sometimes you may have to put trevorloudon.com in the search bar at the top of the page because occasionally Google forgets my IP address, and you can order it there. You can order part 2 as well, which will be coming out soon after. Now, the first book deals with senators from Arizona all the way through to Massachusetts. The second book will deal with senators from Michigan all the way through to Wisconsin. What could I have on these senators? What could I fill a 350-page book with that would be so worth reading for Americans? Well, we'll go through a few of them. Kyrsten Sinema from Arizona, very much regarded as the moderate senator, the oil company's senator, stood in the breach for a long time against the radical programs of the Democratic Party.
I will not support separate actions that worsen the underlying disease of division infecting our country.
Though she tends to have folded more in recent times. Well, she has extensive connections to the Arizona Communist Party. These weren't just back in the early 2000s. She's had connections all the way through. She's had at least one Communist Party member working on her election staff. The Communist Party campaigned for her in the last election. They say in their literature, well, she sort of turned out more like a Hillary Clinton Democrat. She used to be a radical. Well, we know what Hillary Clinton did. She was an extreme radical who pretended to move to the center to get elected. Well, what's Kyrsten Sinema doing? And also from Arizona, Mark Kelly. Well, we know about Mark Kelly's big business involvement with Communist China. He used to go around hawking vitamin supplements, riding a motorcycle with the Chinese and American flags.
I took Shaklee vitamins and the Shaklee rehydration drink while in orbit aboard the space shuttle. They worked very well for me in a very demanding environment.
He even advertised these supplements from space when he was an astronaut. He met his wife, Gabby Giffords, in China in 2002 at a big conference run by a front for the Chinese Communist Party. But he also has some interesting connections with an Iranian front as well. And Mark Kelly, a supposedly moderate Democrat, has come out in favor of Obama's, or now Biden's, Iran nuclear deal. The nuclear deal, which gives Iran tons and tons of money, lifts American sanctions on Iran, and basically gives the mullahs the green light to create nuclear weapons. Well, Mark Kelly, who was a bit diffident on the deal, is now firmly in favor of it. And he has connections to a pro-Iranian political action committee. Even John Hickenlooper, the moderate Democrat from Colorado, look at his ties to China. Look at his ties to Cuba. Also look at his ties to an Iranian pack. John Hickenlooper has brought Communist China into Colorado. He has brought Cuba into Colorado, both enemies of the United States. This goes on and on and on because, as I said, if you were a foreign enemy agent, you would want to use your money and to cultivate US senators. You'd want to work with them ideologically where you could, but if you couldn't work ideologically, you could try compromise, you could try blackmail, or you could try outright bribery, or you could just get your people to donate a lot of money to these senators' campaigns. And if they're in a state which is pretty iffy, if they're not that confident of winning, you know, even a few $1,000s surreptitiously put into their campaigns might be enough to make them vote favorably for your cause. My friends from Connecticut will really love the profiles on your senators, Richard Blumenthal and Chris Murphy. Now, I've said before, the Communist Party USA, which is completely loyal to China, I think basically the Communist Party runs Connecticut. It has links with this governor, the last governor, both of your senators and all of your congressmen, much of the New Haven City Council, and much of your state legislature, upper and lower houses. Richard Blumenthal was caught last year speaking at the Connecticut Communist Party's annual Amistad Awards. He was caught publicly, he was photographed there, and he said, well, I didn't know it was a communist event. I didn't know it was a communist campaign. Well, everybody on the left knows that in Connecticut knows that the annual Amistad Awards are a communist event. Everybody knows that. And Blumenthal should know it because he's been working with the Connecticut Communist Party to some degree or another since about 2006. So it's very surprising that he wouldn't know that the annual Communist Party dinner in that state was a Communist Party dinner, but he still chose to speak there. Now, Chris Murphy, the other senator, is just as bad. He had a Communist Party member on his staff. And remember, the Communist Party is loyal to China, but it still has extensive ties to Russia, to Putin's Russia. Young Communist Party members went to Russia in 2017 for a conference organized and keynoted by Vladimir Putin. He opened the event, and this was to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution, and it was 30,000 young communists from all over the world, including the Communist Party USA. So Chris Murphy and Blumenthal, by the way, were leading the charge against Trump. Trump's colluding with Russia. They were at it for a couple of years, just hammering it and hammering it. Meanwhile, both of them are working heavily with the Connecticut Communist Party, which is loyal to both Russia and China. Chris Murphy even had a Communist Party member on his staff as his outreach director for about 3 years. He has worked with the party since the early 2000s, back in the Iraq War days. He knows the Communist Party very well, and the Communist Party knows him. Let's go forward to Massachusetts. Well, we all know about Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren has been working with Democratic Socialists of America for years. One of their senior supporters, Heather Booth, helped Elizabeth Warren with her signature consumer protection agency that was basically a tool to hammer American capitalism. Elizabeth Warren worked with the radical left to get that through, one of her greatest achievements in her time in the US Senate. She was even given an award by the Midwest Academy. That's an Alinskyite school. They follow the theories of Saul Alinsky, the Chicago radical. You know, Hillary Clinton was an Alinsky disciple, so was Barack Obama. But they have a school in Chicago called the Midwest Academy. They have an annual prize dinner, and Elizabeth Warren has been awarded at that prize dinner. And that is run by Democratic Socialists of America, Marxists, and they are happy to give an award to a serving US senator. Now, Ed Markey, the other US senator from Massachusetts, his history goes way back into the 70s. Back in the 70s and 80s, there was a big move promoted by the Soviet Union and promoted by the American Communist Movement for a nuclear weapons freeze. Massive international propaganda campaign.
I've got a question for 1 million people. Do you want to freeze the arms race? Do you think that Ronald Reagan is going to freeze the arms race? We need your help in Congress.
This is how it was meant to work. The US and the Soviet Union would sign a treaty to freeze all future development of nuclear weapons. And the United States would stick by that. And the Soviet Union would cheat as they have cheated in every other agreement, as Russia continues to do. So after a few years, the American arsenal would stay as it was, and the Soviet arsenal will double, and then the Soviets could either blackmail America into submission or start World War III. And that's pretty much where we are on what we are on the cusp of right now with Vladimir Putin. And this is because of the work of people like Ed Markey, who pushed this freeze idea. The freeze didn't go through, but since 1992, America has effectively built no more nuclear weapons, while the Russians are continually upgrading theirs. They have weapons that could take out Britain, one weapon. And America hasn't built one since 1992. Some people are not even sure many of them work now, because they have a 25-year shelf life, and they are being delivered on bombers sometimes that are older than the crews that maintain them. So Senator Ed Markey was a big part of that movement. And even today, he is still trying to get a similar act pushed through the US Senate now to make sure America never makes any more nuclear weapons, while Russia continues to do whatever it wants. And China is also building up its nuclear arsenal.
Mr. President, in facing all of these challenges, we cannot continue to preach temperance from a bar stool. As the leader of the only country to have used nuclear weapons in a conflict, we can't afford to take a back seat when it comes to reducing nuclear risk. The President must use his position to send the message that responsible nuclear weapons powers don't roll out new weapon systems in military parades. They sit down in good faith negotiations to reduce the size and uses of their nuclear deterrence.
But one organization I haven't mentioned, and it's featured heavily in the book, is the Council for a Livable World. Now, I've talked about it a little before, but you really need to really know the background of this, because of the current, I think there's 49 Democrat senators, or 47 plus 2 independents, Angus King from Maine, Bernie Sanders from Vermont. 43 of them were elected by the Council for a Livable World. So is Barack Obama, so is Joe Biden, so is Hillary Clinton, so is Tim Kaine. What the Council for a Livable World does, it was set up by a Soviet spy called Leo Szilard. And what he did was set up an organization in those days, in 1962, which would elect US senators in small states. Because it was very easy, very cheap to elect a senator, for instance, in Maine or Vermont or New Hampshire or Rhode Island, those little states. You could elect a senator for not much money, but they would be super powerful. You get a lot of bang for your bucks. And these senators would then be tasked with gutting the US military at every opportunity, voting for treaties favorable to the Soviet Union, canceling US weapons systems, cutting the size of the Navy, cutting the size of the Army, every possible thing they could do to weaken the US military. And as I said, 43 of the current Democratic senators have relationships with the Council for a Livable World. Joe Biden was made by them. They got him elected in 1972. He's appointed several of their staffers to key positions in the National Security Council and the Department of Defense, all involved with disarmament. While Russia and China are building up their weaponry, Biden wants to cut what nuclear weapons we have. He wants to reduce ship numbers even further. This is the very last time we should be cutting the US military, and that's what Biden's doing, because he's always worked for the Council for a Livable World. Always.
You know, my ties with the Council run long and deep, stretching way back to my first campaign for the United States Senate. I'll never forget the faith you showed and the help you gave to a young man making a long-shot bid for the United States Senate in 1972. Because of you, we won.
And right now they have, I think they're running 8 senators this election cycle and have helped to elect 43 of those currently serving. And I profile these people. I look at them. It's all about Hawaii, you know, way out in the Pacific there. Mazie Hirono. You know, she's a pretty inoffensive senator. She votes extremely left. But you want to look at her connections to the Hawaiian Maoist movement. See, the Maoists were big in Hawaii because A, Hawaii is close to China. Hawaii has a large Asian population, the young radicals who tended to be sympathetic to China, and that's Mazie Hirono's people. She has worked with the Hawaiian Maoists from her teenage years, from when she was in college, right up to the present day. She is very, very radical, supported by the Council for a Livable World, one of your most left-wing senators, but nobody calls around for her background. So what I'm saying is this, folks, I want you to get the book. Not just because it makes me money. This is how I survive, by the way, but it's important that I survive. But it's because we are living in a time of crisis. And we have got to this crisis because so many of our leaders are compromised. The grassroots of America, the grassroots of Canada and Britain and Australia, New Zealand, France, Germany, Hong Kong, India, They're patriots. Brazil, they love their country. But in virtually every Western country, they're being betrayed by their leadership. And as I made the point before, if you're an enemy of a particular nation, your best way forward is to buy and co-opt your enemy's politicians. And as America is the #1 enemy of the tyrants of this world, guess what they've been doing? You wonder why we had a nuclear deal with Iran. Look to the US Senate. You wonder why illegal immigration passed the US Senate. Look at some of the people serving. You wonder why the Senate is not standing up for America, that is not really standing against China. If you wonder why these things are happening, it's because so many of the US senators are compromised. They've either taken money from Iranian PACs or the Council for Livable World, or they're involved with the Communist Party USA or Democratic Socialists of America or Liberation Road or all of the above. They're basically working against the US Constitution while taking your money, and you need to know about it. Elections matter, and most of these people are elected because of the ignorance of the electorate, and the media ain't going to tell you. So my team and I spend our time researching the backgrounds of these people, and we've spent the last few months putting these 2 books together that I believe will shock you beyond measure, because you got to know people. Just getting rid of these people from the US government would turn this country around. A country can survive fools, but it can't survive traitors. And it doesn't mean everybody in this book is a traitor. Some undoubtedly are, but they have all been compromised in some degree or to some degree or another by enemies of this nation. So please check it out. Go to my website, trevorloudon.com. Security Risk Senators Part 1, Part 2 will be available soon. Check out the other books and DVDs I have available, especially Enemies Within the Church. That will knock your socks off, dealing about the Marxist infiltration of the evangelical churches. And look at White House Reds, my last book. If you want to know Joe Biden's background with the Council for a Livable World, you want to know Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg's extensive Marxist background, check out White House Reds. So I'm back, people. You'll see a lot more of me in the near future. I've got a whole lot of shows planned, so please stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks very much for watching. God bless America, and God bless every one of you. Thank you.